Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps my honourable colleague from Alberta can outline in very clear terms the threat that foreign governments are posing on Canadian members of Parliament who simply want to stand up for human rights and justice, peace, order and good government in Canada.
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question that was asked by my colleague from British Columbia. And it's, as I highlighted in my speech last night, not too many hours ago, it's especially prescient at a time when yesterday evening we learned that there was a sophisticated cyber attack, as announced by Premier Eby in British Columbia, against certain government infrastructure, IT infrastructure in that province. And I think that it speaks to not only the risks that members of Parliament face, but to ultimately the need for Canadians to feel free to engage, be a part of, and active in their democratic process. I think so often what happens in this place is a signal to what is possible and the potential of what happens across our country. So I think that it's not only the necessity to ensure that the government is responsive, and one of the big questions here, Mr. Speaker, is that the government knew, but they did not inform. And the need to ensure that there is that clear, those clear lines of communications to make sure that we have the trust for not only members of Parliament, but for all Canadians, including diaspora groups, some of which may be vulnerable to some of these types of attacks.
Well said.
Comments? The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We had this debate last night. This is an important question of privilege. And we've seen in the information that has come forth in the preliminary report from the whole commission that the NDP pushed hard to have set up as a public inquiry. But at the time, as foreign affairs clearly documented cases came forward, whether it's the member for Vancouver East or the member from Wellington Halton Hills, members of Parliament were not informed. And now we have this issue of the question of privilege where 18 members of Parliament were victims of a cyber attack and were not informed by the government. I wanted to ask my colleague, is it ever appropriate that the government withhold important information like that when members of Parliament are involved? Is it ever appropriate that the government not put into place protocols so that the members of Parliament who are targeted by this foreign interference are actually made aware of this?
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think that highlights the need to ensure that there are processes in place, that there are protocols. But I think that we need to be careful in this place, that we don't allow the need to look for a solution to something that was obviously a failure of leadership. Time and time again, we see this government will only acting when pushed, only acting when forced to respond. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that in the discussions that have taken place in the aftermath of Justice Hoag's report, in the continuing conversations around election interference, making sure that our democratic infrastructure is secure, making sure that us as members of Parliament, we are able to do the good work that we do, but also, Mr. Speaker, and I would emphasize this again, that it is not simply us as members of Parliament that need to be concerned. It is all Canadians to ensure that their voices in our democratic process are protected, because that is the very heart of what democracy is meant to be.
So true.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, in yesterday's debate, as I mentioned, I was one of those 18 parliamentarians targeted by this pixel reconnaissance attack from APT31. And as I disclosed, this isn't just any cyber hacking group in their mom's basement. These are actually intelligence officers working for one of these subnational governments that the Beijing government loves to use in order to target legislators. I was targeted because of my work with IPAC. So I want to ask the member, because he just spoke a little bit about the impact on free speech that this has and about dissident groups. And we've heard it from other members as well. This has a chilling effect on diaspora groups in Canada in their interactions with members of Parliament. So it's a direct impact on our parliamentary duties and our parliamentary privileges to ensure we can do this work on behalf of Canadians. So I want to hear from the member, does he think this has a chilling effect on people's interaction with MP offices to know that members of parliament can be targeted by foreign governments, and a government that is supposed to be responsible to ensure our protection and our protection of our digital devices and infrastructure chose to do nothing about it, chose not to inform us despite having a moral and ethical responsibility to do so?
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the member is right. There is that chilling effect, and it's not limited to the circumstances to which we are debating this privilege motion. But, Mr. Speaker, time and time again, we see how we have a government that has refused to act, been unwilling to act. In some cases, we have learned has not acted because it would not have been in their political interest. Mr. Speaker, whether it's individuals coming into our constituency offices, whether it's us as parliamentarians being able to do our jobs effectively, including advocate for some of those who are most vulnerable around the world, or whether it be making sure that all Canadians, including those of diaspora communities that might face repercussions for their political activities in Canada to their family members and whatnot back home. Mr. Speaker, this is so seriously because freedom of expression and the freedoms associated with our democracy have to be guarded at all costs.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my colleague from Battle River Crowfoot for his intervention today. And I also am one of the 18 parliamentarians who were targeted by APT 31. And, you know, what's really disturbing in all this is that not only were we targeted because we're part of the IPAC, the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, but those of us that are involved in diaspora communities, or also in my case, the Shadow Minister for National Defense, we are dealing with sensitive information. Often we have people in diaspora communities that are coming to us and sending us emails talking about certain issues that they're concerned about, whether it's happening in the communist regime in Beijing, whether in my case also dealing with issues around the corruption and human rights abuses that we're witnessing in Ukraine from the Russian Federation and, of course, those kleptocrats that are in the Kremlin, as well as dealing with the theocracy and the human rights abusers that are over in Tehran. And so those diaspora communities send us emails. And if this APT 31 hack had been successful, that information, that sensitive information of the diaspora communities, of individuals who have come to Canada seeking asylum and now call Canada home, their identities could have been jeopardized and could have been even more targeted than what we currently see under the Foreign Interference Commission that's being done by Justice Hogue. So I'd ask my colleague if he can talk to the fact that this is not just an attack on our parliamentary privilege, not just an attack on us as parliamentarians, but an attack on all Canadians and our democratic institutions, because we do have dictatorships and authoritarian regimes like the People's Republic of China that are trying to undermine our democratic institutions and target Chinese nationals right here in Canada.
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot, a minute and a half.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question posed by my colleague from Manitoba, and acknowledge his strong advocacy in fighting to ensure that Ukraine has everything it needs to be able to defend itself at a time when its territorial integrity has been compromised by a dictator. And I know that Russia and Vladimir Putin's regime is another example of how there has been attempts to interfere in Canadian democracy, and I know that member, as well as many other, have been sanctioned. And it speaks to the people of this country deserve to have to be protected. So, Mr. Speaker, I would simply say this: it's unfortunate that the government is only forced to act after being pushed. It's unfortunate that we learned about this from our American allies. Action needs to be taken, but ultimately, Speaker, we need a government that takes national security and the freedom of Canadians treats that with the seriousness that it deserves.